In this new world, every person moves through their days accompanied by robotic hands that do all the handling and carrying, and by an AI mind that holds all the planning and remembering and deciding, so that human life continues without labor. The square is covered by a broad roof of pale glass and open timber, and under it the benches run in long rows facing inward toward a central paved space, and the benches are wide, wider than they would need to be if people were only resting briefly between one obligation and the next, wide enough that a person can settle sideways, or stretch their legs along the seat, or arrange a coat behind them as a kind of cushion. And the robotic hands that accompany each person do exactly that kind of arranging, without being asked, finding the comfortable angle, pressing the fabric smooth, settling into a small mechanical stillness once the adjustment is done. Nobody is waiting for anything. That is the first thing that becomes clear when you stand at the edge of the square and simply look. The benches hold people the way deep chairs hold people, with a quality of genuine occupation, not temporary pause. A man near the center bench has his legs crossed and his head tilted back at a slight angle, looking up at the glass panels of the roof where the morning light comes through in long, pale sections. His robotic hands rest on the bench beside him, fingers loosely curved, and there is a cup somewhere near his arm, set on the bench's wide wooden rail, and neither the man nor his hands seem to be attending to it at the moment. It is just there. The cup has been placed, and the placement is enough. Further along the bench line, two people sit close enough to talk, but are not talking. One looks toward the paved center, where a few children move around a low fountain. The other looks at nothing in particular, or at the middle distance, which amounts to the same thing. Their robotic hands are not still. One pair is folding a cloth that was carried in, folding it with the careful, repeated motion of something that does not tire, and the other pair is adjusting the collar of a jacket, a small, repeated tuck and release, until the fabric sits right, and then a soft settling sound as the fingers find their resting position. That sound happens often in the square. It is not loud, and it does not interrupt anything, but once you have noticed it, you notice it constantly. The brief mechanical exhale of a grip completing itself, fingers finding their final arrangement after a task finishes. It comes from different directions, slightly staggered, like the sound of a room going quiet in stages. And it fills the square with a quality of low, continuous activity that belongs entirely to the hands, and not at all to the people. The people themselves are remarkably still. Not frozen, not absent. There is a tension in them, a kind of loose, receptive awareness, the way someone looks when they are not waiting to speak, when they are simply present in a place. A woman near the far end of the bench row has a book open across her knees, but she is not reading it at this moment. She is watching the fountain. The book stays open because her robotic hands are holding it open, and the pages do not flutter because the hands have a light grip along the spine. And at some point she will look down again, and the book will still be exactly where she left it, at the same page, in the same light, and there will be no effort involved in returning to it. That is what the benches show, if you look long enough. They show what happens to a body that has nowhere it must be next. The posture changes. The shoulders drop in a way that is different from tiredness. It is not the drop of someone who has been carrying weight and finally set it down. It is the drop of someone who has never been asked to carry anything, who has always been accompanied, whose body has learned over time that the weight will be managed and the arrangement will be handled, and the small frictions of moving through a day will be absorbed before they arrive. Children cross the paved space at irregular intervals. A small group of them has been circling the fountain in a pattern that has no clear rules, which is to say, it has the rules of something invented minutes ago, and already half forgotten. One of them drops a shoe. The robotic hands attached to that child retrieve it before the shoe has fully stopped moving, and the child does not break stride, does not look back, continues the circuit of the fountain with one bare foot and then one shod foot until the hands have retied the lace and everything is even again. At 10,012, a tray arrives at the bench row from the direction of the service counter along the western wall. The person it belongs to has not turned toward it yet. Their attention is still on the square, on the children, on whatever quality of the morning light is coming through the glass panels at this particular hour. The tray settles beside them, held by their robotic hands at a comfortable angle, and the cup on it sits steady, and the steam from it rises in a thin column that bends slightly as the air moves, and the person will turn toward it eventually, or they will not, and either way, the cup will still be there. The bench line holds everyone at the same unhurried depth. The service counter along the western wall is not a counter in the way counters used to be understood, with a line forming in front of it and a person behind it tracking the order of arrival. There is no order of arrival here, or rather the order does not matter, because nothing waits on it. The counter is a long surface of pale wood set against the wall, and behind it the preparation of drinks and small plates continues at its own pace, steady and unhurried. And in front of it, people drift rather than queue, arriving at angles, stopping when they feel like stopping, turning away when something in the square catches their attention. The whole arrangement moves with the ease of something that has let go of urgency so completely that urgency no longer even leaves a shape behind. What makes it work is the hands. A person approaches the counter without any particular focus on it, still carrying the loose attention of someone who was looking at something else a moment ago. And before they have fully oriented toward the surface, their robotic hands have already extended slightly forward, have already received the cup being passed from the counter's own service mechanism. And the cup settles into the grip with a small mechanical sound, a brief, soft click, like a latch finding its seat. And then the person is already turning back toward the square with the cup in their hands keeping, and the transaction, if it can be called that, is finished without having fully begun. Nobody leans forward. Nobody checks a number or a name. This is the part that takes a moment to absorb if you have not been watching it long. The service counter does not require readiness from the person receiving from it. It requires nothing from them at all, in the sense that their attention can be entirely elsewhere, and the exchange will still complete correctly, because the AI mind has already registered what is wanted, or what is likely wanted, or what has been wanted at this hour on other days. And the robotic hands manage the physical transfer, and the human body simply continues doing whatever it was doing, which, in most cases, is very little. A man stands near the middle of the counter for several minutes, without appearing to decide anything. His hands receive a cup of something warm. He does not look at it. He is watching two children near the fountain, and the cup sitting in his hands is simply part of the arrangement, part of what the day provides. And eventually he will drink from it, or he will not, and the temperature will be managed either way, the hands tilting the cup slightly when it needs to be kept warm, adjusting their grip when the contents shift. The counter itself stays clean without visible effort. Surfaces are wiped between uses by the service mechanism's own attachments. Cups that are empty are taken back before they have been sitting long enough to become a problem. Plates are cleared. Spills, when they happen, are handled in the same quiet way that everything is handled, without announcement, without anyone pausing what they are doing to attend to it. The result is that the counter always looks as though it has just been prepared for the first arrival of the day, even when it is well into the morning and has served a great many people. The people who come to it do not seem to notice this. Or they notice it, the way you notice a floor that is level, not as a feature, but as the simple condition of the place. There is a woman who has been standing near the far end of the counter for some time, not waiting for anything, or not waiting in the sense of expecting something to arrive. She is simply standing. Her robotic hands hold a small plate that has been empty for a while, and the plate will be taken back eventually. And she will remain standing, or she will drift toward the benches, or toward the open end of the square where the light comes in more directly, and none of these outcomes requires a decision in the effortful sense. The AI mind will have registered her direction when she begins moving in it, and the hands will carry what needs carrying, and the space will receive her wherever she goes. The counter does not close. There is no closing time in the sense of a moment when service stops and the surface is locked, and the lights behind it go off. Preparation continues at a lower rate in the quieter hours, and the range of what is offered narrows slightly toward evening, but the basic availability of something warm, something to hold, something that makes the hands feel occupied without demanding anything of them, that does not end. And because it does not end, people do not time their arrivals around it. They do not think, before leaving home, that they should stop at the counter before it gets busy. There is no busy. There is no before it gets busy. There is only the counter, present along the western wall, offering whatever it offers, at whatever pace the morning or afternoon or evening asks of it. By mid-morning, the square has settled into the particular rhythm that the counter makes possible without intending to. People move between the bench line and the counter, and the open paved area in a circulation that has no fixed pattern, no schedule, no pressure behind it. A cup is set on the railing of a bench, another is carried toward the fountain's edge. The small mechanical settling sound comes and goes across the space as hands complete their adjustments, as grips are shifted, as plates are received and cups are passed, and the sound is so familiar and so constant that it sits below notice, the way the sound of water in a fountain sits below notice, present but not demanding anything. The open paved area at the near end of the square is where the children have gathered, and they have been there long enough that their game has changed shape several times without anyone stopping to renegotiate the rules. The rules are not fixed. They do not need to be fixed, because when something drops or rolls or gets away from someone, the robotic hands are already retrieving it, already returning it to wherever the game requires it to be. And so the game can afford to be loose, to drift, to become something else mid-play, without losing its materials. A ball rolls toward the edge of the paving stones. A small hand reaches for it and misses, and the mechanical fingers behind the child are already moving, already closing around the ball before it reaches the gap where the stones meet the planted border, and the ball is back in the air before the child has finished turning to look for it. Nobody interrupted the game. The game did not pause. What this produces, across the whole area where the children move, is a kind of play that has no natural stopping point imposed by loss. In most games, something gets away from you, and you have to go after it. And in going after it, you break the rhythm, and sometimes the rhythm does not come back and the game dissolves. Here the rhythm does not break because nothing gets away. Balls return. Scarves that come loose from necks are folded and held until wanted. Shoes that slip off during a run are replaced before the next step. The mechanical fingers working with the same matter-of-fact ease they bring to everything, and the child barely registers it, the way you do not register the ground being level when you walk. At 11:40, a child near the edge of the paved area drops a scarf while running. The scarf is already lifted and folded behind them before they have taken 3 more steps. They do not look back. The children have invented a game that seems to involve one of them standing very still, while the others move around them in widening circles, and then something changes, a sound or a signal too small to read from this distance, and the standing child begins to move, and the circling children scatter. It is not a game that would have a name. It is too new, and it will probably be different in another hour. But the materials of it are all present. The paved surface, the bodies, the robotic hands that keep everything managed at the edges, a cup set on the low wall beside the planted border where one of the older children paused a few minutes ago, and is not returned to. The younger children fall more often. This is simply true, and it is handled simply. A knee meets the paving stones, and the robotic hands are already producing what is needed, a cloth, something to clean the graze, something to cover it if covering is wanted. The child may cry briefly or may not. Either way, the hands are attending to the physical part of it, and the child's attention can go wherever it goes. Toward the adults sitting on the benches nearby, or back toward the game, or toward the sky for a moment, without the physical part waiting. The graze is cleaned. The cloth is folded away. The game continues, or the child sits for a while, and the sitting is fine too, because there is no pressure to return, and the game will not fail without this one body in it, because the others are already adapting, already reshaping what they are doing around whoever is present and whoever is resting. Seen from a little distance, the paved area is a field of small, loose motion, with the robotic hands moving at the edges and underneath, managing the dropped things and the scraped things and the untied things, while the children themselves move freely through the middle of it all, not attending to any of that, not needing to. Snacks arrive already opened. This is something you notice if you watch for a while. A child holds out a hand, and the robotic fingers place something into it, already unwrapped, already in pieces if it needed to be in pieces. The child eats without slowing down, without looking at what they are eating, because the decision about what to eat was registered somewhere, and the AI mind has already managed it, and the hands have already prepared it. And the child's attention is entirely free to stay on the game. A child stops, not because anything has happened, but simply because they have stopped, the way attention moves. They stand at the edge of the paved area and look outward toward the benches and the counter and the people moving slowly through the square, and their robotic hands are still, which is unusual enough to notice. Usually the hands are doing something, adjusting something, holding something, holding something. But for this moment, they are simply hanging at the child's sides, settled. And the child is looking at something or at nothing in particular, and then the game calls them back in some way, and they turn and run. A small mechanical sound comes from somewhere behind the group of children as a set of hands readjusts its grip on a gathered pile of jackets that have been removed and set aside during play. The sound is small. No one reacts to it. The low wall at the border of the paved area holds the cup left by the older child, and it sits there with the same patience that all cups in this square seem to have. which is the patience of things that are not needed urgently, that have been placed and can be returned to, that are held in readiness by the simple fact of being where they were left. The garden terraces begin where the square's paving ends, at a low step that most people cross without looking down, because the robotic hands have already managed the small shift in weight, steadying a shoulder or adjusting the grip on whatever is being carried, so the transition from stone to path happens without interruption. The paths here are wider than they need to be, and this seems right, because people use the width. They do not walk in single file. They move at angles, stop sideways, let their bodies drift toward whatever has caught their attention. A bed of low plants, a trellis with something climbing it, a view across the lower terrace to the water beyond, and the width accommodates all of this without anyone needing to step around anyone else. At a 1005, a figure pauses near the far edge of a planted bed and looks outward toward the water. Their robotic hands do not pause with them. The hands continue working at the level of the plants, reaching into the bed with a precision that has nothing urgent in it, clipping a stem here, gathering a fallen leaf there, pressing a small stake more firmly into the soil where something has leaned away from its support. The clipped stems collect in a shallow basket that one of the hands holds open while the other works, and the basket fills slowly, without ceremony, while the person beside it keeps looking at the water and does not look at the basket at all. This is the arrangement here. The body goes where the attention goes. The hands go where the work is. Nobody designed the terraces to be maintained this way, or perhaps they did eventually once the pattern became clear. Either way, the result is that the garden is always being tended without ever appearing interrupted by its own tending. A person walks a path, and their hands trim the edge of it as they pass. Another person sits on a low wall, and their hands pull spent blooms from the plant growing through the wall's joints, dropping them into that same kind of shallow basket, which was already there, already positioned, because the AI mind had registered the walk and anticipated the wall and placed the basket accordingly. The paths are clean in the way that paths are clean when the cleaning is continuous rather than scheduled. There is no hour when the terraces are closed for maintenance, no section roped off while work is done. The work moves with the people. It is not that the terraces maintain themselves. They do not. It is that the maintenance travels along with whoever is present. So the presence of a person in the garden is also automatically the presence of the care that the garden requires. A vine that has grown past its wire is tied back by the hands of the person who happens to be standing nearest to it, even if that person is looking somewhere else entirely, even if their attention is on a conversation or on nothing at all. Further along the path, two figures walk slowly side by side. They are not talking, or if they are talking, it is too quietly to carry. Their robotic hands move in the low plantings to either side of the path, and the motion of the hands is coordinated in the way that two people walking together naturally fall into the same pace without deciding to. The hands are not synchronized. They are doing different things, attending to different plants, but the rhythm of them has settled into something that matches the rhythm of the walk. And watching from the terrace above, what you see is a slow passage of two people and four sets of hands, all moving at the same unhurried rate through the garden, and the garden receiving all of it without distinction. A cup waiting on the flat top of a stone post marks where someone has stopped before or intends to stop again. The cup is not empty. It sits with the particular stillness of something set down with the expectation of return, not abandoned, just paused, the way a thought is paused when something in the landscape interrupts it. The stone post is at a bend in a path where the view opens briefly before the path curves back under a trellis, and it is easy to see why someone stopped here, why the cup was set down here. because the view at this bend is wider than the rest of the path allows. And there is a bench a few steps further that faces the opening in the trees, and someone has recently been on that bench because it has the look of recent occupation without having anyone in it at this moment. The hands of the absent person, presumably, are somewhere in the garden below, still working. This is a thing that happens here. A person leaves a place and their hands do not immediately follow, because the hands were in the middle of something. Gathering fruit, adjusting a stake, clearing a blocked channel in the irrigation path, and the hands finish what they were doing before they move on. So there is sometimes a small delay, a moment where a person has already drifted up the path, and their hands are still at the lower level, completing the task already in progress. The person does not wait for the hands. The hands do not call the person back. The gap closes on its own. By the time the bench is occupied again, by the same person or a different one, the cup will still be there, or it will have been lifted and refilled and returned, and the difference will not be visible unless you were watching the whole time. The garden does not mark which cup belongs to which person. It does not need to. Things are managed. Things find their way back. The reading rooms are inside, set back from the garden terraces by a long corridor that runs the width of the building, and the light in the corridor comes from a row of high windows on the south side, and by early afternoon that light is full and settled across the floor, and the floor is pale stone, and the light on it does not move much because the windows are fixed and the sun is high. Passing through the corridor into the reading rooms is a slow transition, the kind where your eyes adjust before your attention does, and by the time the adjustment is complete, the room has already made itself understood. The tables are long. Each one holds several people, or holds the evidence of several people. Open books, folded jackets, cups set to one side, even when the people themselves are not all present at once. Some have stepped away. Some are looking out the windows that face the garden. Some are simply sitting with their eyes open and their attention somewhere that is not the book in front of them. At 3002, 3 books lie open at one table, and none of them seem urgent. This is the quality the rooms have, and it is the quality that makes them different from what reading rooms used to be, or what they are described as having been in accounts from earlier arrangements, places of searching, of locating, of navigating systems built to hold many things in order, so that a person could find the one thing they needed. The searching is gone. Not the reading, not the books, not the tables or the chairs, or the particular quality of attention that settles over a person when they are following words across a page. Just the searching. The AI mind carries the arrangement, the recall, the cross-referencing, and what reaches the table is already what was wanted, or something close enough that no correction is needed. A book arrives. The person opens it. Or a person sits down and the book is already there, placed by robotic hands that had already received the instruction before the person had fully formed the thought. Nobody appears to be looking for anything. What they are doing instead is harder to name, but it is visible in the way they sit, loosely, with the particular looseness of a body that has no next task pressing against this one. A woman at the far end of the nearest table has one hand resting on the open page of a book she is not currently reading, and her robotic hands are turning the pages of a second book, slowly, at a pace that suggests browsing rather than purpose. The woman herself is looking at the ceiling, which is high and plain and offers nothing in particular to look at, and yet she is looking at it with the same quality of attention she might give to a view, to something worth holding in the eyes for a moment before letting go. The robotic hands turn another page. The sound is small and dry and complete. At the table beside hers, a man has fallen asleep in his chair. His book is still open. His robotic hands have done what hands do in this situation. They have positioned a folded jacket under his head where it rests against the high back of the chair, and they have moved his cup to one side where it will not be knocked, and they have stopped doing anything else, because there is nothing else to do. The man breathes slowly. No one at his table has adjusted their behavior to accommodate him. He is simply there, sleeping, the way a person sleeps in a room where sleeping is not unusual. The cup sits at his elbow. It has been there long enough to cool. Further into the room, near the windows that face the garden, a group of 4 people sit around a table that holds more books than any of them appear to be reading. The books are open to different pages, some face down to hold a place, some flat and splayed, and the arrangement of them suggests a kind of thinking that moves across several things at once without requiring any of them to be urgent. One of the 4 is talking quietly. The others are listening, or looking at the books, or looking at the garden through the glass. A robotic hand reaches across the table and adjusts the angle of one open book without anyone seeming to have requested it, and the adjustment is small enough that it might not be noticed, and probably is not noticed, and yet the book is now easier to read from where it sits, and that is enough. The talking continues. Outside the window, the garden continues. There is a shelf along the east wall that runs the full length of the room, and it is full, and the fullness of it is not the fullness of a place that has too many things, but the fullness of a place that has been given enough time to accumulate without pressure. Books are returned to shelves by robotic hands that know where they belong, and this means the shelves are always in order. And because they are always in order, no one needs to straighten them, and because no one needs to straighten them, the shelves do not carry the look of things that have been recently corrected. They carry the look of things that have simply always been this way. A child sits on a low step near the shelf, not reading, just sitting, watching the room with the open attention of someone who has not yet decided what to do next and is not troubled by the not deciding. Her robotic hands hold a small cup. It is tilted slightly, the way a cup tilts when it is held without much thought, and a little of whatever is inside has been drunk, and the rest is waiting. At 5005, near the far end of the reading room, a stool is placed beside a low instrument stand by a pair of robotic hands that do this without announcement. The stool is adjusted once. A small settling sound as the metal fingers find the right height and release, and then the hands withdraw, and the stool sits there, empty, in a corner, where several instruments lean or hang or rest on padded surfaces. Nobody moves toward it immediately. This is not unusual. The corner has the quality of something prepared rather than something waiting to be used, and the difference between those two things is part of how the room works. The instruments themselves are ordinary. A stringed instrument with a wide body, a smaller one with a narrower neck, a set of hand drums with skins that have been recently tightened, a wind instrument lying across a cloth on the stand. None of them are locked or stored away. They are simply there, the way chairs are simply there, available without ceremony. A person drifts toward the corner at some point in the late afternoon. There is no particular moment of decision visible from across the room. She is simply elsewhere. And then she is here, standing near the instrument stand, and one of her robotic hands lifts the wide-bodied stringed instrument from its rest with the ease of something that has done this before, and positions it. The other hand adjusts the strap, and then she is holding it, and her own hands, her human hands, settle into place on the strings without hurry. She does not play immediately. She stands with the instrument held against her and looks toward the window, and the garden is outside it. And the afternoon light comes through at the low angle it takes on at this hour, and there is a cup waiting nearby on the edge of the instrument stand, already placed there by the time she arrived, already the right temperature for the time of day. When she does begin to play, the sound is quiet and without particular shape at first, single notes, then short phrases, then something that might be the beginning of a melody or might be the middle of one. It is not possible to tell from across the room whether she is remembering something or finding something new, and it does not seem to matter to her which it is. The robotic hands that position the instrument have stepped back and are still. They will move again when something needs moving. For now, there is nothing to do. The people at the reading tables do not gather. A few look up, briefly, the way a person looks up when a sound enters a room without disrupting it, and then they return to what they were doing, or to looking out the window, or to the particular stillness of someone who has stopped doing anything and is simply present. The man who is sleeping does not wake. His cup is still at his elbow. His robotic hands have not moved. The child on the low step near the shelves tilts her head slightly in the direction of the music corner. Her own small cup is still held loosely, still tilted at its unhurried angle. She listens without appearing to decide to listen. The melody, if it is a melody, continues for a while and then stops. Not because it has ended in any formal way, but because the player has simply stopped playing, the way a person stops walking when they have walked far enough. She holds the instrument for another moment, then her robotic hands receive it back and return it to its rest with the same small settling sound as before. The fingers finding the right position, adjusting once and releasing. The stool remains where it was placed at 5-7-10. Nobody has sat on it yet. At 6002, a different person settles onto it. He arrives from the direction of the reading tables, moving without particular purpose, and sits down on the stool that was placed there nearly an hour ago, and his robotic hands lift the narrow-necked instrument from its rest and position it across his knee. He does not look at the instrument while this happens. He is looking at the room. His human hands find the strings by feel, and he begins to play something low and unhurried, and the sound moves through the room steadily, present without pressing for attention. A few people near the windows shift slightly, not toward the music, but alongside it, the way bodies shift when something in the room changes by a small degree. The reading continues. The sleeping man continues to sleep. The child on the step has set her cup down on the floor beside her, and is now lying on her back on the low step, looking at the ceiling, and her robotic hands are folded quietly at her sides, and she may be listening or she may be doing nothing at all, and the difference is not visible from here. The music corner holds this for a while. One person playing, others nearby in various states of quiet attention or inattention, the instruments resting in their places, the stool occupied at last, the cloth on the stand still holding the wind instrument that no one has touched today. The shelves along the east wall are as they were. The garden outside the window is dimming slowly as the afternoon moves further on. Nobody in the room is waiting for anything to begin or to end. The playing continues, and the room continues around it, and the afternoon continues around the room, and somewhere near the instrument stand, on the edge of a low surface that a robotic hand placed it on without being asked, a cup sits, cooling slowly, available whenever it is wanted. Further along the same corridor that opens off the reading room, past a short turn where the light comes in lower, and the floor changes from the pale wood of the main hall to something softer underfoot. There are alcoves set into the wall at intervals, each one wide enough for a person to lie down fully, each one open on one side to the corridor, but recessed enough to hold its own quiet. They were not built for sleeping, or perhaps they were. It is difficult to say now, because sleeping in them has become so ordinary that the question of original purpose does not arise. People simply use them. They arrive, they stop, they rest, and their robotic hands arrange what needs arranging, and then the hands settle too. At 6048, one of the middle alcoves holds a person already asleep. She is lying on her side, facing the wall. Her coat has been folded by her robotic hands into a shape that sits under her head without bulk, the fabric compressed neatly at the edges. Her hands, the human ones, are drawn loosely together near her chin. The robotic hands are positioned just outside the alcove's edge, low and still, in the particular stillness that comes after they have finished their last small task and found no new one to begin. A cup has been set down beside her on the low ledge that runs along the alcove's inner wall, placed there at some point before she fell asleep, or just after, positioned at a height where it will be easy to reach without sitting up fully. A cup waiting close by, holding whatever warmth it still has, not needed at this moment, but available when the moment comes. Nobody passing through the corridor pauses to look. This is not indifference. It is simply that sleeping in the alcoves is not unusual enough to draw attention. A person asleep in a corridor alcove is as unremarkable as a person standing at a window or sitting on a bench in the square outside. A body at rest in public is not a disruption here. It does not signal distress or emergency or any condition that requires response. The robotic hands stationed at the alcove's edge are still, which means everything is managed. There is nothing to address. Further down the corridor, another alcove is occupied by someone sitting rather than lying. A man with his legs extended and his back against the alcove's inner wall, his head tilted back at an angle that suggests he is not quite awake, but not fully asleep either. His robotic hands hold a folded length of cloth across his lap, not doing anything with it, just holding it the way hands hold something when they have nowhere else to be. The corridor light does not reach deeply into the alcove, and his face is partly in shadow. He may be looking at the ceiling, or he may have his eyes closed. From this distance, it is not possible to tell, and there is no particular reason to move closer. The corridor itself is not empty. People pass through it at intervals, moving between the reading room and the rooms beyond, or simply using it as a route between one open space and another. They move without hurry. Their robotic hands carry what they carry: a book, a folded scarf, a cup, a child's shoe. And the passage is quiet, except for the occasional small settling sound of mechanical fingers adjusting their grip, a brief soft sound, and then quiet again. A child appears from the direction of the reading room, moving at the particular speed of a child who is not going anywhere specific, which is to say slowly and with small deviations. Her robotic hands carry a flat object, a board of some kind, a game piece, something smooth, edged, and light. She passes the first alcove without looking in. She passes the second. At the third, which is empty, she stops, looks into it for a moment, and then continues on. She does not go in. The alcove remains empty. Her footsteps diminish down the corridor. The woman in the first alcove has not moved. The cup on the ledge beside her is still there, in the same position, undisturbed. Time is passing in the way. Time passes in rooms where nothing is being accomplished and nothing needs to be, steadily and without announcement. At some point after 7th out, a different set of robotic hands enters the corridor from the far end. They belong to a figure moving slowly, an older person whose pace has the quality of someone who has been walking for a while and is considering stopping. She looks at the alcoves as she passes them, not with any particular intent, just the way a person looks at the things that line a corridor when they are walking through it without a destination. At the third alcove, the empty one, she stops. Her robotic hands are already beginning the small preliminary adjustments, a cushion drawn from the bag they carry, positioned against the alcove wall, a blanket unfolded to a useful size and laid across the ledge. She settles into the alcove without ceremony, the way a person sits down on a bench they have used before, and her robotic hands finish what they started, and then they still. By the time the hour turns, the cup set down beside the sleeping woman is lifted again, not by the same hands that placed it, but by her own robotic hands, which have noticed, in whatever way they notice things, that she is beginning to surface. The fingers close around the cup with the small settling sound of a grip found and confirmed. The cup moves to where it can be reached. The woman does not open her eyes yet. The cup is simply there, ready, a cup waiting nearby in the low light of the alcove while the corridor continues its unhurried passage around her. The corridor beyond the alcoves opens at its far end onto a broad, covered path, the kind of passage wide enough that several people can walk abreast without adjustment, with a ceiling that rises at the center and drops toward the sides, and light coming through panels set into the upper walls, the kind of light that has held the same quality all day and will remain so until the building dims it toward evening. The path connects two large interior spaces, and because of this, it sees a steady low movement throughout the day. Not crowds, but a continuous thread of people passing at their own pace, arriving from one direction, disappearing into another, occasionally stopping to look at something on the walls or simply pausing in the middle of the path for reasons that are not visible from a distance. An elder is crossing the path now. He moves at a pace slower than most of the others who have passed through today, slower than the child who came through earlier, slower than the couple who walked together without speaking, slower even than the man who stopped twice to look at something on the walls. His pace is not labored. It has the quality of a pace that has simply settled at what it is over a long time and no longer changes much. He takes a step and then another step, and the space between them is not rushed. His robotic hands carry everything. This is not unusual. Everyone's hands carry what needs carrying, but the particular arrangement is worth noticing. A seat cushion is held under one arm, flat and slightly compressed from use. A cane hangs from two fingers on the other side, not being used at this moment but available, swinging very slightly with each step. A cloth parcel rests against the cushion, tied at the top, its shape suggesting fruit or something similarly rounded. A cup is held level and unhurried, the liquid inside not moving because the mechanical grip is steady enough to keep it still. He is in the middle of the path. Others pass around him with the same unhurried spacing that characterizes movement here, not the careful navigation of someone trying not to disturb, but the natural adjustment of people who have time enough to adjust, who do not need to push through or find the fastest line. A woman with a book under her arm drifts left without breaking her pace. Two people in conversation move apart briefly and come back together on the other side of him. None of them look at him with particular attention. He is simply where he is, moving at the pace he moves at, and the path accommodates this, the way a wide path accommodates anything. At 7035, somewhere further along the promenade, a folded chair is being carried toward the water. Here, the elder continues. He pauses near the middle of the path, not to rest, or not only to rest. There is something on the wall to his left, a long panel with something mounted on it, and he looks at it for a moment. His robotic hands do not set anything down. They hold what they hold, the cushion and the cane and the parcel and the cup, all of it steady, and he looks at the panel, and then he turns back to the path and continues. The small settling sound comes twice in quick succession, the cane shifting in its grip, the parcel repositions slightly, and then the hands are quiet again. What is noticeable about the arrangement is not the weight of what is being carried, because the weight is not visible as burden in any mechanical sense, but the completeness of it. Everything he might need for the next several hours appears to be with him. The cushion for wherever he sits, the cane for whenever the ground changes or the distance lengthens, the fruit for later or for now, depending on when he wants it, the cup, which has been level and patient this entire time, still containing whatever was put into it before he started crossing. He reaches the far side of the path. There is a bench there, set against the wall where the ceiling drops, and he turns toward it. His robotic hands begin the small preliminary sequence, the cushion placed on the bench seat, the parcel set beside it, the cane laid along the back of the bench where it will not slide, and he sits down with the same unhurried quality with which he crossed. The cup is set on the wall ledge at his right side, within reach. He does not look around with any urgency. He looks at the path he has just crossed, watching the movement through it with the mild attention of someone who has sat in this kind of place before and found it adequate for sitting. People continue to pass. The thread of movement is the same as it was before he arrived, and will be the same after he leaves. The mechanical fingers that set the cup down have stilled. The cane is where it was placed. The parcel sits at his side, still tied. He has not opened it yet. There is no particular reason to open it yet. The path continues to hold its movement, a figure appearing from the far end, two more behind them, the low sound of footsteps, and the occasional settling sound of robotic hands finishing a small task somewhere out of sight. The elder sits with the ease of someone who has been moving towards sitting for a while and has now arrived. The cup is at his right. The cushion is under him. The afternoon, or whatever part of it remains, is available in the way that time here tends to be available, without edge, without the particular pressure that would make sitting feel like something that needed to be earned. The path from the covered square to the water takes perhaps 10 minutes to walk, but nobody here measures it that way, because measuring it that way would imply there was somewhere else to be afterward, and there is not. The path widens as it descends, the paving stones giving way to a broader surface that runs alongside the water's edge, and by the time the light has begun to change, the particular flattening of afternoon into something cooler and more horizontal, there are already figures at the railing, standing in the way that people stand when standing is enough. The railing itself is low and continuous, running the length of the waterfront in a single, unbroken line. People lean against it or stand close to it without leaning, and their robotic hands manage whatever they have brought with them. Blankets folded over the rail, cups held or set on the ledge that runs along the inner edge, small parcels and bags arranged on the ground nearby, with the quiet efficiency of hands that do not need instruction. The water beyond the railing moves in its own way, catching the changed light and releasing it, and the figures along the rail watch it, or do not watch it, with equal ease. A cup waiting nearby is the ordinary condition of standing here. At 7035, a folded chair arrives. The robotic hands carrying it have been carrying it for some time. It was visible earlier, further back along the promenade, still folded, still patient in their grip. and now it is opened at the railing with a soft sequence of unfolding sounds and the small settling click of the legs finding level ground. The person who sits in it does not hurry to sit. There is a moment between the chair being placed and the sitting, a pause with no anxiety in it, and then the figure settles into the chair with the same quality as the chair settling onto the stones. Robotic fingers adjust the angle slightly, then they still. The blankets that arrive at the railing come in different ways. Some are carried folded until the moment they are needed, then opened and placed around shoulders or across laps by hands that do not fumble and do not wait for instruction. Some arrive already loosely draped, adjusted as the air cools, the mechanical fingers working the fabric into a better position with a motion that is small and unhurried, and the settling sound that follows is soft, a final small shift of grip, and then nothing. Two figures stand side by side at the railing without speaking. One holds a cup. The other has a cup set on the ledge beside them, and their robotic hands rest loosely at their sides, not idle exactly, but quiet, in the way hands are quiet when there is nothing that requires them. The water holds the last of the direct light, and the figures watch it without urgency, and there is no particular moment when one of them decides to look away. It simply happens when it happens. The promenade does not empty as the light continues to change. It thins in places and fills in others, figures arriving from the direction of the gardens and the indoor halls, and the railing receives them without any sense of pressure or capacity. A family with a child settles near the middle section of the rail, the child's robotic hands already holding a small lantern that the child has not yet asked for, but that arrived at the right moment regardless, and the lantern puts a small circle of warmer light on the stones below it. By 8004, 2 places on a bench set back from the railing have emptied and are filling again. The people who left did not leave with hurry. Their robotic hands gathered belongings in the unhurried sequence of hands that know what belongs to whom and in what order it should be collected, and the departures had the quality of something that had simply run its course. The figures who take their places arrive with the same quality, no searching for the right spot, no arrangement of belongings that requires decision, because the hands manage the arrangement, and the person simply arrives and is present. The cup on the bench ledge beside the second figure has been there for a few minutes before they sit. It is already at the right height. The robotic fingers that placed it have stilled. The figure sits, looks out toward the water, and does not immediately reach for the cup. There is no reason to reach for it immediately. It is there when it is needed. The lanterns that appear along the promenade as the light continues to fall are carried mostly by robotic hands, though some are set on the railing ledge or hung from the low fixtures spaced along the path. They do not change the scene so much as they allow it to continue. The figures at the railing remain figures at the rail. The water remains the water. The quality of standing here does not change with the light. It was already sufficient in the afternoon, and it remains sufficient now, and the lanterns are simply what makes that continuousness visible. A person near the far end of the railing has been standing in the same position for a long time, long enough that the light has shifted noticeably since they arrived. Their robotic hands hold nothing at the moment. A cup was set on the ledge earlier, one waiting nearby, and it is still there. And the hands rest with the particular stillness of hands that have finished a task and have not yet been given another. The figure looks out at the water. The water does not require anything of them. They do not require anything of the water. The evening continues in this way, the railing holding its line of presences, the lanterns doing their small work. the settling sounds coming occasionally from somewhere along the path as one set of mechanical fingers finishes an adjustment and quiets. At some point, the promenade stops receiving new arrivals, not because it closes or signals anything, but because the hour has moved past the point where people tend to begin an evening walk, and the figures already present have settled into the kind of stillness that does not invite addition. The path remains occupied. It simply stops growing. The departures, when they come, happen in small groups and alone, and they come at intervals long enough that the promenade does not feel like it is emptying. A figure at the railing turns from the water, and their robotic hands lift a folded blanket from the ledge and hold it ready, and the figure walks back along the path without looking behind them. A couple near the middle section of the rail turns inward toward each other, and then turns toward the path that leads back to the covered square, and their hands carry between them the small accumulation of an evening. A cup, a parcel, something folded, something small that the child between them is now holding because the robotic fingers have transferred it gently into small human ones. The child does not look back either. The lantern goes with them. Where they were standing, the railing is simply railing again. The ledge holds nothing. Someone else drifts into that section of the path a few minutes later, not to claim it, but because walking along a railing tends to bring people to whatever section is open, and the open section happens to be that one now. The robotic hands beside this new figure carry a blanket that has not yet been unfolded, and the figure leans against the rail and looks at the water. The blanket stays folded. The water at this hour has a quality that is harder to see than to be near. The far edge of it is dark. The middle catches what light remains from the lanterns along the path, and from whatever the sky still holds. The surface moves without sound from this distance, or with a sound too low to separate from the general quiet of the evening. The figures at the railing are not watching the water do anything particular. They are simply near it, and being near it is the thing they came for. By the time the promenade has thinned to a third of its earlier population, the remaining figures have spread along its length in a way that feels natural and unplanned. There are clusters near the fixtures where lanterns burn brightest, and there are solitary presences at the darker sections of the rail, and neither arrangement seems to have been chosen deliberately. The robotic hands beside each figure have quieted into the particular stillness of late evening. The small settling sounds that come when fingers have adjusted a grip or released an object now spaced further apart, less frequent, as though the need for adjustment has simply slowed with the hour. A figure on a bench set back from the railing has been there long enough that their robotic hands have twice refilled the cup on the armrest from a small container they carry. The figure has not moved significantly between one refilling and the next. The bench is wide enough to sit in loosely, and the figure sits in it loosely. The water is visible from where they sit if they look past the railing and the standing figures, which they do occasionally, and then they look at nothing in particular, and then they look again. Nobody is hurrying. This is the most obvious thing about the promenade at this hour, the absence of hurrying. Not the absence of movement, because people do move. They walk slowly along the path, they shift their weight at the railing, they turn from the water and walk back the way they came. But none of this movement has the quality of needing to arrive somewhere before something changes. The movement is the thing itself, not a means toward something else. A figure walking away from the railing is not going somewhere urgent. They are simply going, and going is what they have decided to do with the next part of the evening, and the robotic hands beside them carry whatever they brought and keep pace without comment. The lanterns along the path will continue after the last figures have gone. They are not calibrated to presence. They burn at the same steadiness whether the promenade holds 50 people or none. This means that when the last figures eventually leave, the path will remain lit, and the railing will remain there, and the water will remain at the edge of the light, all of it continuing in the same condition it was in while people stood along it, requiring nothing, holding nothing back. But that is later. Now there are still figures at the rail. A few have moved to the benches and sit facing the water from a slight distance. The robotic hands beside the bench figures have set things down at their feet or on the armrests and have stilled. The cup on the nearer armrest has not been touched in a while. It is simply there, the way the railing is there, the way the water is there. Part of the arrangement of the evening that nobody assembled deliberately and nobody needs to take apart. The promenade settles slowly. That is the closest description of what it does as the hour deepens. Not emptying, not closing, but releasing. Gradually, the way a held position is released when the body decides it has been held long enough, without decision, without signal. Simply because the time for it has passed, and the next thing, whatever it is already beginning in the quiet way that things begin here, without announcement, without effort, without any hand that is not already reaching gently toward it.